Hello, in this lecture I want to provide an overview of the history of Indonesia up to 1870. The approach I'm going to use is called world history, or sometimes called structural history. So the approach I'm using has been inspired by those ideas, particularly in Indonesian history associated with Clifford Geertz, Harry Bender, and also a historian who's been very influential in my life, a guy called Paul Stang, who was a historian at Monash University. So what we're going to do is start off, you can see here's a map of contemporary Indonesia, but partly what we want to do, I'll give you a bit of a scan, is Indonesia. There's the capital, Jakarta. It's the island of Java. Bali's here, famous holiday spot, large island of Sumatra. The other nation, Singapore, here is one of the bordering nations. Malaysia, which has attached to the mainland of Southeast Asia here, and also on the island here. Up here is the Philippines, the small country of East Timor down there. Papua New Guinea's here. The island continent of Australia is down to the south, and up to the north you get the rest of Southeast Asia. So typically we count Southeast Asia as being Burma or Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, Philippines, East Timor, and that's it. Okay, so now we want to find out how Indonesia ends up with all these names, so let's hide the labels and get started. We're going to start about 60,000 years ago, when we assume that there are no humans in this part of the world. The water levels are significantly lower, so the lighter parts of this map are probably areas that were exposed land. Now we assume that humans travelled out of Africa, that is, they started in Africa and travelled across here over to what is now Southeast Asia in this period, ending up around here, let's say 60,000 years ago. The term we use for that period is that there was a land bridge, and the land bridge means that a lot of these areas would have been exposed land. Not all of them though. So the people who came, and we call the people who came, sometimes we call them the Australo-Melanesian people. The Australo-Melanesian people must have used some sort of ocean transport. They must have got off the ocean somewhere. We know that because the area, if I zoom in here, the area between Bali and Lombok is one of the deepest, well, I've been told it's some of the deepest water in the world. It also marks, by the way, an interesting biological phenomenon which is known as the Wallace line, in that everywhere east of this line you get marsupials like kangaroos, wallabies, that kind of thing. Everywhere west of here you get tigers and that kind of thing. So I don't know much about Wallace line, you can probably tell, but the point is you don't have kangaroos hopping around in Sumatra, and nor do you have tigers prowling around in Timor, and the basic reason for that was associated with a guy called Wallace and this idea of the Wallace line. Anyway, getting back to our Australo-Melanesians 60,000 years ago, they must have crossed some very deep water in order to get to this part of Southeast Asia, and then also through to Australia. So we think the current Australian Aboriginals and inhabitants of this island of New Guinea, we think these are in a way the descendants of the first people who came to this area, the Australo-Melanesians. So we see the contemporary Australians and people of Papua New Guinea as being of a kind of similar ancestry, if you like. Now, we assume that these people were hunters and gatherers. So hunting and gathering is the main way that humans go about making a living. Typically, women gather foods and men go hunting. We do think in parts of New Guinea around about, say, 10,000 years ago, I can't remember precisely, people started the first elementary forms of agriculture. We call this horticulture. In other words, they started planting gardens and using rain for water, so rain fed, if you like, gardens. These societies, as hunter-gatherers, had many things in common. You know, as far as demography, quite dispersed. We don't have high populations of people. This structure of hunter-gatherer societies is typically, the word is acephalous, that means non-state. There's very little form of hierarchy in Australian Aboriginal cultures. There's no recorded ideas of big men or chief. In other words, it's a very highly egalitarian society. The economy is reciprocal. In other words, you trade one thing for another. There's no written technology. There's paintings on walls and so on, but no written technology. I'll get that phone call later. The beliefs are typically animist, and what we mean by that is they believe in that spirits inhabit local rocks, trees, streams, that kind of things. So these kinds of beliefs, structures were typical of this area of all of Southeast Asia until about, let's say, sometime about 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. So for the majority of the history of this area, there have been Australo-Melanesian hunter-gatherers living in dispersed settlements. Now, a huge change in the history of Southeast Asia occurs, I'm not sure, let's say 4,000 years ago, and that is with the coming of the Austronesian people. Hi. Yes, and I printed them out and I'm in the middle of recording a lecture. Okay, you're going where? What do you say you're just going now? Where are you going? No, I didn't get that one. Oh, I better log on again. I was in the middle of recording a lecture. I don't want to do this recording. No, this just came while I'm recording. I had this turned off. Okay. All right. And what about dinner? Or do you want to pick up stuff for pad thai? Because we've still got those noodles to get through.